It is somewhat strange. Why did she choose to accept the challenge? It is a battle destined for defeat, and with Meng Jiangxi as a precedent, I cannot think of any significance in her accepting. Li Xiu voiced her doubts. Yun Qi's lips curled slightly as he sidestepped the question. To a certain extent, Kayleigh's Heaven-Breaker sword intent actually counters. Or rather, it does not particularly fear the exquisite, profound realm. But with the addition of glazed glass ice, Kayleigh has no chance of victory. He looked at the two women standing far apart within the battlefield barrier, his state of mind a tangle of unspeakable complexity. One in black, one in white. One cold and aloof like an ice goddess of the frozen moon. The other spiritual and ethereal, beautiful as an epiphyllum in an ancient painting. Perhaps in the eyes of the world, to obtain just one of them would be the supreme fortune of a lifetime for any man, an absurd delusion that the myriad spirits would not even dare to dream of. Yet no one knew, not even Shenwu Yi and Hua Kayleigh, who were facing each other directly for the first time. That one was his lawfully wedded wife, and the other had devoted her body and heart to him, unwavering in this life. Yun Qi forcefully dispelled the chaotic thoughts tangling in his mind and said with focused attention, "This battle is destined not to last very long. Next, it should be my turn." He was not worried that Shenwu Yi would deal a heavy hand against Hua Kayleigh. After all, the lightless divine regent's malice had always been directed only at men. "You," Li Xiu was puzzled. "Although your name has already spread through the abyss, you are ultimately not the Dreamweaver Divine Son. On what grounds will you participate in this battle of the Divine Sons? Furthermore, why would you want to fight her? You're overthinking it. Of course, it is not to fight her." From the corner of his eye, Yun Qi's gaze silently brushed past the Abyssal Monarch's location for an instant. "I once experienced true loneliness. That feeling of having people by your side, yet your heart remaining utterly empty, it is extremely terrifying. And the Abyssal Monarch, the loneliness he endures is likely who knows how many times heavier than mine was back then. It is like walking alone in an endless dark night, year after year, until 1,000,000 years have passed. If a brilliant light that tears through the loneliness were to suddenly appear in this endless dark night, it would be absolutely impossible for him to ignore it or remain silent." Li Xiu seemed to fall into thought. Shenwu Yi of the Eternal Night Kingdom of God, cultivation at the Divine Extinction Realm Level 6. Hua Kayleigh of the Heaven Breaker Kingdom of God, cultivation at the Divine Extinction Realm Level 2. For this battle, Shenwu Yi must be granted the Profound Desolation Seal to balance her profound energy realm to be equivalent to Hua Kayleigh's. Within the Chief High Priest's palm, that bronze-colored profound light shone once again. Following that, this streak of profound light shot forth, passing through the barrier and landing upon Shenwu Yi's body. At the instant of contact, the profound light suffered a momentary, inexplicable stagnation, causing the Chief High Priest's brows to furrow slightly. But this sort of stagnation lasted only for an imperceptible instant before blooming upon Shenwu Yi's body, transforming into a small ceiling profound formation, then quietly vanishing. Immediately, Shenwu Yi's profound energy aura weakened with extreme speed. In just 3 short breaths, it had plummeted straight to the Divine Extinction Realm Level 2, achieving a near-perfect balance with the profound energy Hua Kayleigh was releasing externally. "Begin!" With a clear and soaring sword cry, glazed cloud was unsheathed. Sword brilliance resembling flowing fireflies poured out, reflecting upon Hua Kayleigh's body. It was also in this instant that the young girl's temperament changed abruptly. The faint trace of childishness at the bottom of her eyes quietly retracted, and her spirit-clear, moon-like eyes condensed into cold stars that one almost dared not look at directly. Her posture remained slender and soft, yet she was wreathed in a stern sword intent that warned all living things not to approach. Her snow-white cloud robes danced without wind, and the 7 stars sword crestan, divine star crest in her skirt flowed along with the sword intent, bursting forth with fine, fragmented, magnificent light. At this moment, a wave of inexplicable trance washed over everyone's eyes. The Heaven Breaker Divine Daughter, who in their memories was peerlessly beautiful like a star from the heavens but had never fully grown up, actually faintly possessed the sword immortal bearing of Hua Qingying. The light in the Abyssal Monarch's eyes underwent a slight shift for a single instant. Shenwu Yi raised her hand, the heartless sword pointing diagonally at the ground beneath her feet. But she did not release an offensive stance, nor did she condense the glazed glass ice. Clearly, she wanted Hua Kayleigh to attack first. The sword intent in Hua Kaylee's eyes had already condensed into even more soul-piercing cold stars. The fingers gripping her sword were long, slender, and fair. The chi glow winding around her fingers and the sword glow of the glazed cloud sword had already merged without gaps, spreading out into an invisible field of cold, transcendent energy around her. 7 pale sword lights circled silently around her body. More than half the people present had not even noticed when these 7 sword lights had condensed. Hua Kaylee slightly raised her eyes. Wherever her gaze fell, it was as if the very air was severed by the sword's momentum, rippling with fine undulations. Without seeing any movement or change in her aura, one sword light suddenly shot out, carrying a slender white trail as it stabbed directly at Shen Wuyi. Shen Wuyi did not move a muscle. The sword light passed through her body. Yet in the instant it passed through, it suddenly stagnated. The afterimage dissipated, and Shen Wuyi's true body was already on Hua Kaylee's left side, close enough to touch. A spatial shift of the exquisite, profound realm. But in the very instant Shen Wuyi's true body appeared, a sword light abruptly reflected in her pupils, barely half a foot away from the center of her brows. Clearly, it was an unpredictable spatial shift, completed in an instant. One that should have made it impossible for the opponent to relock onto her with spiritual perception in the first moment. Yet this sword light seemed to have been lying in wait, stabbing straight toward her almost at the same time she revealed herself. At such a close distance, with the sword light arriving so abruptly, it was Shen Wuyi who was caught off guard. Unable to evade, she could only execute a second spatial shift. Kai! The sword light stabbed empty air, leaving behind a pale sword scar that did not disperse for a long time. Shen Wuyi's true body appeared in the sky above and to the right of Hua Kaylee. Similarly, the instant she appeared, 2 sword lights arrived head-on from the left and right. Shen Wuyi's sword momentum had not yet risen. She barely managed to twist her body, letting the 2 sword lights graze past her. But immediately, 2 more sword lights followed closely. The sword lights that had grazed past her from behind also suddenly turned, 2 in front and 2 behind, sealing off all her routes of retreat. Kai, Shen Wuyi's afterimage shattered. The 4 sword lights all struck empty air, leaving only the screeching sound of tearing space. 1,000 jang, 3.33 kilometers away, Shen Wuyi's true body emerged. She glanced sideways at her right arm. A severed tear, several inches long, had appeared on the black clothing of her right shoulder, revealing jade skin that surpassed snow, as well as a bleeding sword wound. A brief silence, followed by an uproar. No one had expected that in the first exchange of blows between the 2 women, it would be Shen Wuyi who suffered injury. Even Dian Jiaji, up until his defeat, had failed to inflict even an external wound upon Shen Wuyi. Could that be the legendary Heaven Breaker sword intent? Meng Jiangxi said with no small amount of surprise. I heard that 3 years ago, when the Heaven Breaker Divine Daughter finished her training, she not only completed a breakthrough in her realm but also comprehended the Heaven Breaker sword intent. But Uncle firmly believed that to be a false rumor, because not even Senior Sword Immortal was able to comprehend the Heaven Breaker sword at that age. I never thought that not only is it true, but it appears. She wields it so naturally and skillfully. It does not look like she has just glimpsed the doorway at all. Yun Qi watched the barrier, not uttering a word. Meng Kongchen said faintly, the world only knows that the Heaven Breaker sword intent of the Heaven Breaker Kingdom of God can make an opponent's profound energy as brittle as thin paper, easily broken. But few know that the most powerful aspect of the Heaven Breaker sword intent is that the sword lights it condenses possess their own spiritual consciousness. As someone who had fought Hua Fuchen many times, Meng Kongchen naturally counted as one of the people in the world who understood the Heaven Breaker sword intent best. Ordinary profound practitioners perceive enemies with spiritual perception, but the sword of Heaven Breaker, its sword consciousness pursues the heart and locks onto the soul. This situation was within expectations. Around Hua Kaylee, the 7 sword lights had all returned. She had not moved an inch under her feet, yet the hearts of every profound practitioner present trembled. As people of the 6 kingdoms of God, no one could forget the shocking evaluation the cold and strict chief high priest had once given Hua Qingying. The number 1 person in history regarding sword Dao talent across the 6 kingdoms of God, and the only person in the current era with the potential to achieve the true God realm through her own self, without inheritance. Even such a peerless sword immortal took 77 years to comprehend the first wisp of Heaven Breaker sword intent. And Hua Kaylee, ding! A soft chime rang out, carrying a bone-chilling coldness that instantly dispelled the stray thoughts in everyone's hearts. On Shenwuya's hand, the heartless sword had already condensed a faint, icy glow. Around her, that layer of glazed barrier, bizarre and nearing the demonic, also appeared. Even when facing Diane Jiaji, she had not condensed the glazed glass ice this early. The tide of noise completely extinguished. Everyone held their breath and focused their minds, waiting to witness whether the Heaven Breaker Divine Daughter's Heaven Breaker sword intent, at the same cultivation realm, could sever the glazed barrier that Diane Jiaji could not forcibly break even when surpassing her by 2 realms. But Hua Kaylee spoke softly at this moment. "I am not your match." She seemed to be speaking words of surrender, but her voice was as cold and clear as a spring, without a trace of shame or weakness. On the contrary, her demeanor and field of aura suddenly surged with an intense resolve, one that bordered on finality. "My chance of victory lies in only one sword. If you take this sword, I will concede." Zheng, zheng. The glazed cloud sword suddenly began to tremble lightly, bringing forth bursts of slightly frenzied sword hums. Hua Fuchen's gaze solidified. He wanted to witness with his own eyes the great surprise Hua Kaylee had prepared for him. The Heaven Breaker third sword she had comprehended within the 7 stars Heaven Breaker formation. What kind of magnificent sword brilliance could it release in her hands? Shenwu Yi remained expressionless and did not attack immediately. Zheng, the glazed cloud sword, trembled violently, emitting a heavy cry sufficient to pierce metal and crack stone. Hua Kaylee's snowy face tensed, and the sword light in her eyes grew strong and prosperous like exploding stars, dyed with a resolve that seemed to sever all existence. The profound energy and sword chi around her body also began to roil and oscillate. Her snow-white cloud robes fluttered wildly, and the 7 stars sword crestan divine star crest in her skirt all lit up with strange radiance, flickering in and out of existence. Magnificent, yet seeming to carry a few distinct strands of unease. Shenwuya's brows furrowed abruptly. She suddenly felt as if a sword was pressed against her heart and soul, carrying an indescribable, almost absurd sensation of soul binding. It made her feel inexplicably, yet incomparably clearly, that under this sword her heart was pursued and her soul locked onto. There was nowhere to flee. And the sword light of this sword was becoming more blazing with each passing breath. The sword might skyrocketing madly with every instant, gradually growing so strong that a deepening chill began to manifest within her heart and soul. She raised her sword horizontally, and layer upon layer of glazed glass ice rapidly condensed upon the body of the heartless sword. Hua Qingying's brows furrowed in confusion, followed by a sudden, drastic change in expression. "Kaylee, stop!" This sudden cry of alarm caused everyone to turn their eyes instantly, shockingly discovering that it was the sword immortal Hua Qingying. A streak of azure light rushed over. Hua Qingying had already shifted her body to the front of the battlefield's barrier. Her voice carried an urgency unfamiliar to everyone. "Kaylee, you must not be willful. Stop immediately. Kaylee." Everyone stared with widened eyes. Those who knew the name of the sword immortal also knew that Hua Kaylee was her only reverse scale. The only thing that could make her, who had been as cold and aloof as a distant immortal her entire life, lose her composure like this was Hua Kaylee's safety. Hua Fuchen had also realized something. He likewise disregarded where he was and instant-shifted to Hua Qingying's side, his pupils constricting violently along with the intensifying of Hua Kaylee's sword light. That was not the momentum of the Heaven Breaker third sword. It was clearly the Heaven Breaker fourth sword. If they were outside the battlefield, knowing that Hua Kaylee had actually gained a glimpse into the Heaven Breaker fourth sword would have made him overjoyed to the extreme. But at this moment, sensing the trembling of Hua Kaylee's sword aura and the abnormally violent nature of her sword intent, only terror was born from his shock. She had not yet mastered the Heaven Breaker fourth sword. Otherwise, she would have excitedly told Hua Qingying long ago. Furthermore, the sword might of the Heaven Breaker fourth sword required an immense expenditure of profound energy. With her cultivation of only divine extinction realm level 2, even a single sword strike was extremely forced. To forcibly unleash it, the result would likely be injuring the enemy by 10, but damaging herself by 12. To her aunt's shouting, Hua Kaylee gave no reaction. It was not that she turned a deaf ear, but that currently her heart, will, and soul were all condensed into the sword intent. She had no attention spare whatsoever. The chief high priest raised his head. A tyrannical, peerless barrier instantly appeared before Hua Qingying and Hua Fuchen, and that warning voice which allowed no violation resounded through Eden's crown. Stand down. No one is permitted to interfere with the battlefield. The white light blooming from the glazed cloud sword grew increasingly blazing, gradually stirring up flakes of fragmented, crystalline white light, which then converged into a sky full of light stars resembling fireflies. Driven by the violent sword aura, the light stars slowly and arduously condensed, gradually transforming into a pale white sword beam, 7 feet in length, upon the glazed cloud sword. At the instant the sword beam formed, the surrounding space twisted violently, followed by the rapid surfacing of fine, dense cracks. This scene caused the crowd of profound practitioners to suck in a breath of cold air. How tough and durable was the space at Eden's crown. Yet Hua Kali, with profound energy at the divine extinction realm level 2, had caused clearly visible spatial tears. One could imagine that the might of this sword had completely and utterly transcended the boundaries of the realm she was in. But the shocked states of Hua Fuchen and Hua Qingying made the current situation clear to even those with the shallowest knowledge. Although this sword of Hua Kali's was extremely terrifying the moment she swung it, it would inevitably be accompanied by a massive price. Their hearts shook, and they were astonished and puzzled. In the Pure Land conferences of the past, the Heaven-Breaker divine daughter had always disliked fighting most of all. Today was her first meeting with Shen Wuyi. There was no possibility of any grudge between them. The battle of the divine sons ultimately only concerned a bit of the kingdom of God's face and the abyssal monarch's promise. It did not involve any core interests of the kingdoms of God or the divine bearers at all. Why? Did she have to be so persistent and resolved? Diane Jiuzhe's demeanor presented a panic that was difficult to conceal. He broke free from Diane Sansi's support, his lips opening and closing, several times on the verge of shouting out of control. Yun Qi's face was calm and placid, but his chest heaved with slightly evident urgency. On Shen Wuyi's sword, glazed glass ice was also condensing rapidly. By the time the heartless sword pointed forward, the slender sword body was already dotted with dozens of small, exquisite ice lotuses, releasing a terrifying icy breath that seemed to want to freeze even the vision cast upon it. Amidst the dazzling and chaotic sword lights, Hua Kali's beautiful eyes finally opened slowly. Within her eyes was a young girl's pure, flawless, translucent magnificence, yet they also carried a pure resolve that others could not understand. Countless sword lights and sword stars intertwined, beautiful to the point of suffocation, yet carrying a stern chill that could destroy heaven and earth. The glazed cloud sword, carrying the sword beam, stabbed out. In that instant, heaven and earth lost their sound. Hua Qingying sighed in anguish. She knew deeply that the instant the sword might erupted, Hua Kali would inevitably suffer heavy injuries. But this was Eden's crown. She was destined to be unable to stop it. She could only wait for the moment the victory and defeat were concluded to rush and protect her at the first opportunity. Shen Wuyi's sword stabbed out at the same instant. Following the straight and flat trajectory of the sword body, blossom after blossom of ice lotuses bloomed with endless, brilliant, and tragically beautiful ice radiance. The world became completely quiet. Everyone forgot to breathe. The flow of time also seemed to become slow. In pairs of pupils dilated to their limits, the figures of the two women were clearly reflected, along with the sword beam and ice radiance drawing closer and closer, until at a certain moment they finally collided and overlapped. Yet the world remained a patch of dead silence. There was no explosion of ice crystals, no sword beam severing the sky, not even a single shred of sound from profound energy breaking through the air. Between Hua Kali and Shen Wuyi, a white figure had appeared. He stretched out both hands, a single finger of his left hand touching the glazed cloud sword, a single finger of his right hand tapping upon the heartless sword. The sword beam and the ice radiance, and even all the profound energy they were releasing externally, vanished completely. It was as if they had been instantly erased from the world by an invisible hand, leaving not a single trace of their obliteration.